Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
I'm Caroline Hyde at Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Coming up, Nvidia continues its meteoric rise. It touches $3 trillion in market cap. Full coverage ahead.
Plus, SpaceX's Starship reaches new milestones in its fourth major test flight. We bring you the details.
And we'll discuss the latest in the world of crypto as Bitcoin still hovers near record highs. First, let's check in on the broader markets. Maybe just a little bit of profit taking today. Maybe we see the ECB over in Europe actually cut rates, but signal that maybe inflationary pressures are here to stay. We've got jobless claims actually showing that they're higher than anticipated, but all eyes on non-farm payrolls tomorrow. So at the moment, we're just cautious ahead of those numbers. We're trading flat on the NASDAQ. Interestingly, Nvidia just offered that $3 trillion market cap just at this very moment, but it did eclipse it yesterday, Ed. We'll go into that in a moment. 10-year yield currently just pushing up 2 basis points. Bonds selling off globally after the ECB does cut, but still warns us that they've got to have a restrictive policy for longer to try and curtail inflation. That means the euro is actually just that little bit higher versus the US dollar at the moment. We're up 0.1%, as maybe we don't anticipate rate cuts coming for the ECB until at least pushing out now to maybe September. Move on, have a look at what's happening in the world of crypto. We're going to focus in on Bitcoin a little bit later in the show. We've had a little bit of volatility, but we're up 0.3%, 71,000, still at that very high level, near record highs. Will we get to 100,000 by the end of the year? That's what one key investor has been saying. But Ed, what are you watching?
Let's talk about Nvidia. Gen Sanity, the phrase coined for the enthusiasm, let's say, of markets about Nvidia's CEO. Look, this is a clear pullback. The stock's down a percentage point. As you said, we touched $3 trillion in market cap. We're going to get into it with Bloomberg's Jess Menton about valuations, comparisons against other peers on the S&P 500. Weightings are really important, but Apple's flat. I put that up as a precursor to my next chart with Meta, the best performer on the NASDAQ 100 from a points perspective, because this is all we care about right now. Let's bring up the terminal chart and look at Nvidia's market cap relative to Apple. It is so close right now. Apple just a touch above 3 trillion. Nvidia just a touch below 3 trillion. It was brief, it was short-lived. But the point is that Nvidia is only the third company to reach $3 trillion of market cap, and it's the first ever semiconductor name or chip maker to do so. Let's get into it, Carrie. Let's talk about on which metric we decide if this is fair, if it's a good idea, or if it's not.
And longer term, whether you keep on buying into this stock. Jess Menton's with us, of course, at Bloomberg. And we just had that perfect setup from Ed telling us, once again, Apple is back, just pipping the post as number 2. But Nvidia has just hit that landmark. It's all psychological, isn't it?
It really is.
And in many ways, so too is a stock split. It's psychological. What's driving us here?
Well, not surprisingly, because it is the stock split driving this, moving higher. Ahead of that, because Monday is when the official stock split goes into effect. But something that's important, to be an official shareholder before the 10-for-1 stock split, you actually have to be a shareholder today by the close of trading in order for that to work. So it's interesting dynamic that we saw this huge run up and now the stock's selling off a little bit. Not surprisingly, we just did, to your point, Caroline, see that 3 trillion mark yesterday as well. If you look at the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, obviously it houses other stocks like AMD, Intel, Micron Technology, also down about 1% today. But again, to Ed's point, when you're thinking about valuations versus the stock move that we've seen here, and also talking about Apple, Caroline, if you think about that April 19th low that we saw in Apple stock, that stock's close to about 20% higher in that span. It's only about 2% off of that December high record. But when you do look at Nvidia in that span, that stock's up from that April 19th low for Apple, though, in comparison, Nvidia's up more than 60%. So which one was the better stock to buy? But again, Apple does have that fundamentals behind it when you think about the buybacks for a company like this, Ed.
It's like one of those things. So it's 3 minutes past 8 in San Francisco, 3 minutes past 11 in New York. Is Nvidia bigger than Apple? Okay, and that's what we're going to do every day from this point because we're so excited about it. But the actual reason that I showed this sort of in the moment session trading is an important one, which is that start of the year, Nvidia had, I think, about a 3% weighting on the S&P 500. It's doubled to about a 6 or more than 6% weighting. And we talked at earnings about how Nvidia's earnings like a macro level event. My point, Jess, is like it impacts a lot of people right now what happens with Nvidia.
It does, especially when you're talking about this stock now being the second largest weighting in the S&P 500. And something that's interesting about this, even though we did see it eclipse Apple's market cap yesterday, earlier in this week, if you use the MEMB function for the S&P 500 in the terminal, you would have seen Nvidia's weighting higher than Apple's, but still its market cap wasn't crossing the threshold of Apple. And the reason is because actually it has to do with float adjusted type shares. So Apple's float adjusted, it's actually 94%. Whereas the other 6%, for instance, is held by institutional big investors like, say, Warren Buffett. Whereas Nvidia or even Microsoft, those are 100% not adjusted. So there's a little bit of a divergence there sometimes when you're looking in the terminal. And if you saw a divergence at the beginning of this week versus what the weighting was, and we're kind of scratching your head wondering why Nvidia's market cap wasn't bigger than that. But that's something else, that a dynamic when you're thinking about sort of the size and scope for a lot of these companies and why you're seeing discrepancies there sometimes in the data.
And we await that 10-for-1 stock split, which will be an interesting moment. Bloomberg's just mentioned. Thank you very much. Let's go up into space. SpaceX's massive Starship rocket blasted off on its fourth major test flight as the company makes or works to make the vehicle operational, reusable, and ready for regular space trips. I want to bring in Bloomberg intelligence analyst and fellow space nerd, Matt Bloxham, for this. I mean, loads of our audience were asking me all morning because we carried the launch live. Hold on, the booster got dumped in the Gulf of Mexico. Starship spacecraft got dumped, a controlled splash in the Indian Ocean. But really, I think the story here, Matt, is the data that's gathered from the process. And that's what was important for SpaceX.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, one of those words you said there, controlled, is really important too. That these were controlled re-entries and kind of splash landings for both parts of the asset. And I think that's really important. I think what we've seen in the previous launches is very big fiery explosions, which has meant they've not quite delivered what they hoped to in those tests. And also, it's added delays to getting approval from the FAA to do the next test launch. And that they've got this ambition to launch people on a manned mission to the moon sometime on or after September 2026. So if they want to kind of get anywhere close to that, they need to be doing these tests very frequently and getting success. So I think the fact that it was not perfect, but close to perfect in terms of the objectives, I think will help them to kind of speed up those tests and move towards that objective.
I mean, clear focus of congratulations coming from, well, the guy who, of course, ultimately leads this business. Long term, whether it's on a day-to-day basis, Elon Musk saying, despite loss of many tiles and damaged flat, Starship made it to the way to a soft landing in the ocean. This incremental need for improvement, how costly is that, Matt?
Very costly. This program is kind of running into kind of billions and billions of dollars, but they've got multi-billion-dollar contracts with NASA, and ultimately NASA's a really important client for theirs in terms of taking US astronauts back to the moon. But also this program is really important for the Starlink business, which is their low Earth orbit satellite business, which has a huge number of customers now, maybe approaching 3 million, and they want to use the Starship rocket to send more and more of those satellites up into low Earth orbit over the midterm. So, it's important both for NASA and it's also important for the SpaceX business as a whole, and particularly Starlink.
Love bringing the contextualization there. Matt Bloxham, we thank you, Bloomberg intelligence analyst and fellow space geek. Meanwhile, we turn our attention to China for a moment. Alibaba, the president, Kuo Zhang, speaking exclusively with Bloomberg TV's Annabelle Drulers about China's economy, about tariff impacts on small and medium-sized enterprises on its platforms, but also about how the company is incorporating, guess what, AI. Take a listen.
This year, we are targeting on two parts. The first part is about AI. So, AI GC, the generative AI, actually is one of the biggest kind of breakthrough for the technology. And using AI in global trade actually is one of the perfect user scenarios. So many use cases that we can help to improve the efficiency for the sellers. We can help their efficiency, how to post product, do the marketing, do communication with buyers, and as well as to manage their business, to see data. And we are using the technology to help the seller, the buyers as well. So previously, the buyers using Alibaba.com as a sourcing engine. And now with help of AI, this kind of a creativity engine for the buyers. We can help them to generate a product which can fit their imagination, and we can use the agent to help them to source, to connect and trade with the right partners. So all this kind of technology can lower the barrier for the seller and the buyers.
That was Alibaba President Kuo Jiang. Watching shares also of Meituan, another Chinese name as we head to break. Earnings beat expectations, top line growth 25%. But the company also expanding to new markets, the Middle East, looking at Europe and other parts of Asia, its first foray outside of its domestic market in China. Interesting. Be right back. This is Bloomberg Technology.
If we take out the 73,000 in the next week or so, we're going to end the year at 100,000, somewhere around there, or even higher. Markets work, they create ranges, and when the top of the range breaks, you have a nice extension. And so, the bottom of that range it started around 40, so 40 to 70, the 70 goes to 100.
Bold calls coming from Galaxy Digital CEO Mike Novogratz. His outlook for Bitcoin as it just hovers still near that record. Joining us for now of what fundamentally or not fundamentally is pushing it higher, VettaFi Editor-in-Chief Lara Krieger. And it's great to have some time with you, Lara. And there has been this focus that at the moment, the political sudden tailwinds in the US aren't being baked in to crypto's price points right now. Do you agree?
That's a good question. I do think that politics has played at least some role here, right? So this is one of the few issues, crypto investing and cryptocurrency, on which we finally have bipartisan congressional support, which, as you know, is very much not easy to find these days. So, I do think politics plays a role here, but not the entire role, right? Like there's also enthusiasm around the finally getting the access to spot Bitcoin ETFs and advisors and institutions gravitating to that vehicle. And also there's interest and excitement around the spot Ethereum ETF, potential of that coming to market, and when is that going to come? And that's the next new hot topic, right?
Laura, it's a presidential election year, right? And all of your industry participant colleagues that come on this program say, we love engaging with Congress in particular, or in Europe with regulators. But it's interesting that crypto's become a point of policy. There's the reporting that former President Trump's very focused on crypto as a platform. What impact do you think that will have?
I think it's helping to drive the conversation forward, for sure. Whereas 18 months ago, 24 months ago, politicians could sort of afford to let it lie, and maybe it felt like it was a little too toxic. The Overton window has shifted a little bit. Now there's no ignoring the reality that we need consistency, we need clarity on these markets, and it's time to start having those conversations. So I think that Trump coming out very much in favor of Bitcoin has sort of helped force the conversation to the forefront, regardless of where you stand on the political issue of it.
You might be getting some clarity. You're not getting consistency. It seems to be slow, all at once when it comes to SEC approvals. And I'm interested, therefore, whether we get upended with other types of spot ETFs, or whether really we do the ETH1 and stop.
That's a great question. It's the one very much top of my mind. So, the SEC a few weeks ago approved this special filing from stock exchanges that allows them to kind of change their rules and list spot Ether ETFs, but that's not the same thing as approving individual funds, although it is a necessary first step. So now the SEC has the task ahead of it of actually assessing and approving the individual ETF filings. That's going to take some time. That's actually SEC head Gary Gensler's words, not mine. So you're going to see the issuers begin to update their filings, and that process does take some time, and is already beginning to happen. So the timeline might be compressed from weeks instead of usually months.
VettaFi Editor-in-Chief Lara Krieger, thank you.
this is still a bit of a novelty. Most people driving next to us have never seen one of these.
This is a robo-taxi from Zoox, an autonomous ride-hailing company owned by Amazon. It has no steering wheel, no pedals, and 4 inward-facing seats. It's now running on a 5-mile loop in Las Vegas, across 3-lane roads, unprotected turns, and in mixed traffic at speeds of up to 45 miles per hour.
We really want it to feel like you're being driven by a very safe, expert human driver.
A Zoox robo-taxi runs on software trained on millions of miles gathered by test vehicles. It's also packed with sensors, cameras, LiDAR, radar, and temperature probes, which generate a full picture of the world around it in real time. It's bi-directional, with a battery electric drive unit at each end.
On our left-hand side, there was cones and warnings, and we cut across 2 lanes of traffic.
The map probably didn't have those cones in it, but we have to be able to detect anything that's changed in real time and then adjust our plans accordingly.
Zoox wants to prove its tech works on the outskirts of Vegas before launching in the city as its first commercial market, though a US agency is now looking at Zoox's self-driving tech after 2 incidents with test vehicles. One of Zoox's main competitors is Alphabet's Waymo, which uses retrofitted cars for its autonomous ride-hailing, while GM's Cruise has recently scaled back plans and testing of its own purpose-built Origin robotaxi. Zoox has been deliberately cautious about when a commercial service will launch. Expansion to San Francisco for the true robotaxi is in the works, but right now Zoox can claim to be the only operator of a purpose-built robotaxi allowed to give rides on public roads in America. So it really is a first, Kara, at least in America, a fully autonomous but purpose-built robotaxi, right? No steering wheel, no pedals, on real public roads. That wasn't a controlled test. It was a real one in the real world with real traffic. And the news is that that will be available to the public maybe by the end of this year, December, or at least the start of next year, even if it's in a limited number of miles of road.
Feels like a lot of firsts, but are people, other companies hot on their heels?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about it is the Tesla component to this, right? We know that robotaxi is coming in August in some shape or form, and maybe that's Elon acknowledging that Zoox got it right. Cruise has pulled back its plan for basically the same thing, and Waymo's not really doing it. What's extraordinary is like the real world. So in that example, it was traffic cones, closed lanes, but there are some other things that it can handle as well. Listen to this.
I've really stayed away from the race and, calling who has pole position and who doesn't. There's so much nuance in this industry. What I will tell you is that Zoox has even more conviction in the path that it's chosen, and it is relieved that it chose it and had the courage to do it and to stay on course.
So just real quick, what's interesting is like Aisha Evans, really impressive CEO, spent a lot of time at Intel before Zoox. She just won't exaggerate. She doesn't do the Musk thing of like, this is happening at this timeline, we're going to make loads of money. And that can be frustrating, but it's kind of like Hare and the Tortoise scenario where Zoox was the tortoise and it's come from behind.
Shock, horror, someone actually telling it as it is rather than a little bit of an ambitious sprinkle. But what is ambitious is the fact that it's gone on to the real world, real life. What sort of things did you come up against when in real traffic?
Yeah, I think it's that human drivers are kind of erratic, and sometimes you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, and me as well. And sometimes something might drop out of the sky, or a food truck gets in your way. Listen to this.
There's a truck in front of us, and it happened to be a food truck, and taco plates started flying out of it. It basically looked at it, saw them, slowed down and said, hey, I'm seeing stuff coming. And then it had to make a decision as to this is debris. Is it strikeable debris or not strikeable debris? And so, but it looked on the next lane and said that, I have space there, and just went on around it and moved on.
So literally the Zoox was driving, food truck in front, the doors come out the back of the food truck and tacos and plates fly out, and the Zoox didn't panic. It just
plowed through some tacos.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that was the experience. Checkitout.com. Another big story today, the Foundering podcast is back. And in this installment, our Bloomberg reporters take a look at OpenAI's Sam Altman. From founding a startup at 19 to running Y Combinator at age 29, the CEO behind ChatGPT is the most Silicon Valley man alive. I want to bring in Bloomberg's Ellen Hewitt. Give us just the broad introduction to this version of Foundering and what we learn about Sam?
Totally. So Foundering is, this is in our 5th season. It's a narrative podcast in which we tell one story every season. It's a story of a high-stakes drama in Silicon Valley. And this season, we decided to go deep on OpenAI and in particular Sam Altman, their leader. And I think, what listeners can expect over the 5 episodes is really like an analytical arc of where did Sam come from? How did he rise to power? What are some of the strategies that he's used over the course of his career to accumulate the kind of power that he has now? And what I consider the key question of the series, should we trust him? Should we trust this person, especially after the events of last November, which, as we all remember, he was fired from his seat as the CEO and then within 5 days was back.
Yeah, and what's notable is I think Sam actually told Emily Chang back at the Tech Summit over a year ago, don't trust me, right? There is the ability to oust me, and we saw that happen in real time. Ellen, who are some of the people that he's worked alongside? It's interesting that in particular Paul Graham took to X recently posting, look, this is the truth about how he left Y Combinator, for example. Are we getting any clarity?
Well, Sam's relationship with Paul Graham is a perfect example of how Sam has accumulated power over the course of his career. He, even at a very young age, really won over Paul Graham when he joined Y Combinator at 19. And Paul went on to elevate Sam, writing all these very effusive blog posts about how great a leader he is. And then, in 2014, hand-selecting him to be his successor at Y Combinator. And, Sam goes on to make these partnerships with very powerful people such as Elon Musk when Elon agreed to fund OpenAI, and then later when Elon left and Sam needed more money with Satya Nadella so that OpenAI could continue to get money. And so we do try to track like where he has really made these decisions and what to do with the power that he has now.
It is a heavy burden, I'm sure, and you go into family life as well. It's going to be an extraordinary listen. I can't wait to get into the first episode. Bloomberg's Ellen Hewitt, we thank you. Check out the Foundering podcast now on the terminal and wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. Cara, just a really quick check-in on the markets. This is kind of the broad picture in the United States. The NASDAQ 100 is as flat as a pancake. US 10-year yields creeping just a little higher, 4.28%. And as we've noted, and actually we're now higher in the session, half a percentage point on Bitcoin, but we're hovering at that record level around 72,000 US dollars per token. The equity story is basically Nvidia. We were very excited. We talked about how it hit $3 trillion of market cap. Actually, during the course of this program, the pullback has accelerated down 1.8%. But the big picture is now that Nvidia is such a big weighting on the S&P 500, more than 6%, and there is so much Jensanity, or whatever you want to call it, fanfare around Jensen Huang. There wasn't actually any real news catalyst about its products or its use case in the real world driving the stock. It's a pullback from that $3 trillion market cap mark, of which it was the first chip name to achieve it, the third of all time to hit $3 trillion of market cap, and I suspect we should continue to talk about it for many months to come.
We will, and we're going to talk about who holds it, because it's time for Talking Tech. And first up, ARK Investments, Cathie Wood, is actually saying they're well positioned in artificial intelligence despite having trimmed their Nvidia position in a video interview over in Hong Kong. Wood said that her firm still owns Nvidia in specialized portfolios and in its flagship fund, even though, look, she sold out most of her position before that enormous rally last year. Plus, US regulators, they're investigating Microsoft over a possible acqui-hire deal for an AI startup. Now, that's according to the Wall Street Journal. In March, remember, Microsoft agreed to pay $650 million to license the artificial intelligence software from the startup Inflection, with Microsoft moving to actually hire most of their staff. The deal now faces regulatory scrutiny for resembling basically what looks like a larger company sometimes do, of taking over startups without an acquisition. And US federal regulators have reached a deal that will allow them to proceed with antitrust investigations of Microsoft, OpenAI, and Nvidia. Under the agreement, the US Justice Department will take the lead in investigating whether Nvidia violated antitrust laws. Meanwhile, the FTC will lead in examining the conduct of OpenAI. Ed.
Okay, this is a name that made a big impact earlier in the year. Cognition AI is trying to make software engineering easier, but with AI. The startup is building collaborative AI teammates for engineers so they can focus on more interesting tasks. And they dubbed their own AI agent Devin as the first AI software engineer. Delighted to say that Cognition AI CEO and co-founder Scott Wu is with us in San Francisco. You're somebody that splits your time, San Francisco and New York. We're going to talk a lot about New York. But when you guys kind of, I guess, came out of stealth, the response was absolutely ginormous. The demo video in the millions and millions of views, and your name was everywhere. I just want to know in the first instance what that's been like for the last few weeks and months.
Absolutely, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's been crazy. It's been wild ever since the launch, and I think we've seen a real need in the market for this kind of technology.
There's the gaming use case, which I'm going to get right to. I'm a massive gamer. I don't know what you're playing right now, but I just started playing Resident Evil 4 Remake on PlayStation. And I bring that up as an illustrative example that making video games, the creation timeline is very frustrating for fans. That seems to be something that you think you can help with from the engineering perspective.
Yeah. So we've seen our customers use Devin for all sorts of different use cases. Full stack engineering, data analysis, code migration. And I think in particular, we've seen a lot of real use in some of these real tedious, repetitive tasks that are often taking human engineers a lot of time. And so, we have companies who are doing 1,000-hour projects that are now moving 5 times faster with the help of Devin.
Scott, it feels therefore that you're in we're augmenting humans camp rather than replacing them. Now, how much anxiety have you seen, have you talked about, that this is going to replace people?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, we're all engineers ourselves by training at Cognition. And, even ourselves, we use Devin all the time when we're building Devin. And there's really so much more. What we see all the time is that there's just so much more to build. And we think the heart of software engineering is this deep logical problem solving, and we want to be able to help people do more and more of that, and have to focus a little bit less on some of the implementation and the debugging and all of these other details.
I loved how Ed articulated basically the firestorm you created when you came out of stealth. And much what caught the attention was the money going in, $21 million from the likes of Peter Thiel's venture fund, but also the fact that there were so few of you, just 10 in your team. How is that scaled? What are you looking to do in terms of continuing to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think we're still very, very early, and there's a lot more to do. We've been looking to grow our team, with really great technical talent from both New York and the Bay Area, and we're continuing to scale up and get it out to as many customers as we can. Okay, let's go there, New York and the Bay Area. What is it that New York offers you in terms of talent? What does the Bay Area, how are you thinking about being decentralized or having headquarters in certain places? Yeah, I think both are honestly great. A lot of our team, we have a lot of our team from New York, and we have a lot of our team from the Bay Area as well. And I think we've seen that having access to talent from both locations has been amazing for us.
Part of the exploration of Ashley Vance's story about you guys, it kind of lifted the lid on Cognition, was some mystery about how you did it, how you made so much progress. I'm not a computer scientist or a software engineer, but was this a case of you guys building your own large language model or building on top of other people's large language models? Just give me the basics of why your thing works.
Yeah, so Devin is an autonomous agent, and what that means is that Devin is able to use all the same tools that a human would use. And so, if you think about going through a debugging process or building a website or things like that, you're going to be writing code, but at the same time, you're also going to be running code, you're going to be running tests, maybe browsing the web, reading documentation, all the same, tools that a human would use. And we specifically built Devin to be able to work with those tools and iterate on top of that.
Could we talk about money? In the piece it says you raised $21 million through Peter Thiel and Founders Fund. That doesn't seem like very much when you consider compute costs. Are you revenue generating so you can support yourselves, or are you going to have to find some more cash?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we actually, we closed another round just last month.
Just last month?
And to bring in a little bit more
Tell us about
capital. We raised $175 million from a few different funds, primarily from Founders Fund, Khosla, and Elad Gil.
Would you be comfortable disclosing the valuation-ish?
The valuation was around $2 billion.
$2 billion. Sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
No, yeah. So obviously a lot of really, really great names, and we're super excited to have such great investors at the table. But as you said, I think this money gives us the runway we need to really scale up and to size up and to do more. So.
Do more. Tell us as and when you do. Wow, great to have you being so candid about the money you're raising and the valuation you're currently at. Congratulations on that. Cognition AI CEO and co-founder Scott Wu. Just great to have him in the building. Meanwhile, coming up, we turn to New York Tech Week for our VC Spotlight. Rebecca Caden, Union Square Ventures with us. Talk about the intersection of Web3 and AI. This is Bloomberg Technology. New York Tech Week is still underway right here in the Big Apple. Industry titans, startups gathering throughout the week for events, for panels, conversations, a few rooftop drinks. All week long, Bloomberg Technology has been speaking with these founders and investors. Also, the executives are really discussing how the tech ecosystem in New York City is helping them, why they choose to call it home. Let's turn our attention to Rebecca Caden now, managing partner at Union Square Ventures. Probably a little tired from some of those rooftop parties and various social events, Rebecca. But you've been front-running this week by putting out some thought leadership, just at where you're excited to be putting your money to work over at USV. And it seems to be the intersection of Web3 and AI. Can you talk us through it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super exciting time because we're seeing two kind of tectonic plates of technology shift at the same time, which almost never happens in AI and in Web3. And AI has massive promise on what it can do, but it relies on a reorganization of data. And for its full promise to be met, we think that will most happen if it has access to data in new ways. And one of the most likely ways that could happen is through a Web3 architecture. If you think about it, if we all owned our own data versus it being locked up in large platforms, as new agents and exciting experiences were built on top of AI, it could dip into our data wells, if you think about it like that, reuse it, and create these magical personalized experiences. And so we think both AI and Web3 on its own have massive potential to do very exciting things, but the place where they intersect might create kind of the most exciting new energy.
That feels like it's going to take some time, Rebecca. And that's sort of the issue here. We all get the hype, the valuation exuberance, the idea that we're at this cusp of a new beginning. But to basically move to more of a Web3 architecture and to own our own data, that's going to take some years, right?
Absolutely. I think, and both AI and Web3, we think will fundamentally change much of what we do, particularly online or on chain, but both are on their own timelines and will take time. That being said, they've been being worked on for quite a long time. Neither of them are brand new. And we think some pieces are more likely or happening faster than they've ever had before. If you think about the ability to send capital cross-border. Web3 is enabling that in a way it really hasn't been able to before. The ability to build on top of that is really escalating, and certainly we're seeing it in AI too. So yes, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but the pace of change and opportunity here is very high.
Hey, Rebecca, it's Ed in San Francisco. Can we just take what you've just explained and apply it to New York for New York Tech Week?
Sure.
What's changed for the city in that respect in the last 12 months or so?
Yeah, look, I think New York is an extremely exciting place to be building right now. New York has always been an epicenter for Web3. Crypto has always found a home here. But it's also a great place to build when you're intersecting technology and industry, when you're really talking about the application layer. And that's really what we are talking about here. We're talking about what can be built on top of these new technologies versus the kind of underlying technology itself. And New York is a center of industry. And so a lot of that is going to happen here, and we're really seeing it.
We were just speaking with Cognition's Scott Wu, and he was explaining the most recent round they did, right? 175 million, I think he said, at a $2 billion valuation. But that was basically like their Series A or B, What does that tell you as an investor that's trying to occupy similar spaces and write checks in that domain?
I think what they are doing is amazing, and there are some really magical things being created. What we're looking for is less the magic of technology itself, but what it can do. I think increasingly, we're in a moment where we're really being wowed by tech. But increasingly, AI is going to be an ingredient versus the whole dish, right? When you think about serving customers the best healthcare or the optimal financial services. AI is going to be a piece of how that is done versus the thing itself. And that's where we get excited. And I think as that evolves, it's going to create businesses versus technology, and that will also kind of shift out some of the valuations.
Just how competitive is it to be writing checks to New York-based companies right now? Or indeed, are you sort of agnostic as to where the startup is based, and what are valuations more broadly looking like to you at the moment?
We are agnostic to where the companies are based. We love a New York company. We're a New York-based firm, and we are super proud of what's going on in the ecosystem here, but our portfolio is rather global, and we're really looking for the best opportunities that meet our thesis really all over. But but a lot of them are happening in New York, which is exciting. Valuations are interesting. They're a little bit of a tale of two cities, right? On one hand, when you say AI, it's high priced and very buzzy, but there's opportunities without that in the headline too that are really exciting that we are seeing, where capital is less abundant. And so I think it's not a steady market, and there's a lot of variety in it. I think AI is a piece of the puzzle of innovation right now, but it isn't the whole thing.
Rebecca Caden of Union Square Ventures. Have a great week for New York Tech Week. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Revolt. It's the leading black-owned, operated multimedia platform, and it's just announced a new ownership structure, where it is now entirely owned by its own employees. The move comes after its founder and former chair, Sean Combs, Diddy as he's known, sold his remaining stake in the company amid mounting legal scrutiny. Joining us now is Revolt CEO, Datavio Samuels. This must have been emotional, I can only imagine. And I'm interested in now being completely separated, now being disassociated from Diddy. What made you decide it was going to be employees that should take his shares?
Yeah, if I'm being fully transparent, this idea of employee ownership was a big idea I had coming into the business back in 2020. I'm a big believer in this idea called linked prosperity. And I've told the team since the very beginning that when Revolt wins, we all win. And we have executed through that over the course of the last 4 years in everything that we've done. So if you want to talk about, we've got some of the biggest shows with the biggest creators in the world, they all have upside participation. We probably funded somewhere between 50 to 100 entrepreneurs, gave them capital with no exchange of equity. And the years when Revolt has been thriving, which we've had an amazing last 3 years, our employees have seen the biggest bonuses that they've seen since the company was created. And so for us, this was just another way to not just talk the talk, but walk the talk and make the people who give their blood, sweat, and tears and pour it into this company every single day the opportunity to build wealth.
Wealth is hard to come by in media right now.
Yes.
Like how are you doing that? Like, what is it? Where are the deals being struck? Where is the money coming in for people to see the upside of this equity?
Sure. The deals are going to come because what we have created is a space where we believe that we own this kind of youth culture opportunity. And so back in the days, you've had people who have sat in that seat. You've had great companies like a Complex, a BuzzFeed, a Vice. That was MTV. That was kind of the old guard. Today, Revolt sits squarely in that place. We own youth culture, dominate with youth culture, and we do it through a black-owned lens. And as you know, that for advertisers, youth culture, that kind of hard-to-reach minority audience, is a massive a base that they go after. And so in our world, we've kind of built the killer app. We are the connection to the culture. We connect brands directly to that audience. We connect our affiliate partners directly to that audience. We partner with the biggest brands in the world, from the Walmarts to the Amazons to the Targets, you name it. And through that, we believe we will be able to take this brand to what I'm hoping to be the next black unicorn. It's time for another billion-dollar black-owned business.
Datavio, good morning. Look, in my career, I've covered this scenario so many times where the founder or figurehead of a company goes into crisis and he leaves, and the startup or company tries to move past that, move on. But in most cases, thinking, for example, like the EV company Nikola I covered, the product remains the same, right? You guys want to do the same thing. Do you feel like you're going to have to change the offering or rethink any of the strategy, or you can just continue the way you were going?
No, I absolutely believe that we can continue the strategy in the way that it is. We have said from the beginning that the vision and the mission is not going to change. We exist to shift the narrative for black people globally. The need for that is not changed. The mission, how we're going to do that, by building the world's largest, most powerful black storytelling engine on the planet, that's not going to change. And we do that by partnering with some of the dopest creators who shape culture in the world. That strategy is the perfect strategy for this moment. While a lot of people might see the disassociation from Sean Combs as a big thing, our truth is Sean Combs has never been involved in the day-to-day since I've been there. So the team that you see, the vision you see, the strategy that you see, all the work that you see has been done by the incredible management team that's there and the incredible employee base that's there. And so for us, there's no need to change. It's just time for us to dream bigger and dream blacker.
Okay. Detavio, I'd love to talk about the day-to-day. So you're the CEO, but it's an employee ownership structure. Whose boss is who? Who reports to who?
Well, right now, the company is being board managed. We are minority controlled. And so I sit on the board as the voice and as a representative for the company and for the employees, making sure that whatever our needs are, whatever our demands are, whatever our hopes and dreams are, that those things are represented at the board level so that we can get them done for our employees.
Tough question. How much did he get paid for the shares?
So you know we're a private company, and so I'm not allowed to disclose any of that.
There's going to be some reallocation. Obviously, you've got to decide who gets what money as where they sit in the corporate structure. Getting real, this must have been an incredibly difficult time for those working at Revolt. And I'm wondering how you've helped support those that work there, because this has been tough for anyone who loved the music, who loved the culture, and indeed now feels associated in some way.
Yeah, you're 100% right that the last 6 months have not been easy for this team at all. But what I would say is I am so proud of this team. This is a team that is resilient, that is committed, that is loyal, and what we have just done is shown the entire world publicly that we are battle tested. And so now I'm excited for this team to show what a battle tested team can really, really do. Now, of course, along the way, we did the things that we think you have to do as empathetic leaders to take care of your teams. And this was, you know, regardless of whether this is a Sean Combs, headlines, allegations, crisis, or whether it was something else, we're always going to do what's best by our teams. And so whether that means our ERGs have gone into action to support one another, there have been moments and times where we have brought therapists in to do group therapy, individual therapy. The groups have gotten together to do wellness, community events. But this team has just stuck by each other, supported each other through it all, and I just couldn't be more proud, more humbled, and more honored to lead this incredible, amazing team at Revolt.
Detavio, come back. Tell us how the journey continues. We appreciate it.
Thank
Revolt
you.
CEO, Detavio Samuels there. Meanwhile, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Ed, another whirlwind of space meets valuations, meets corporate culture.
Yeah, it was cool, like talking robo-taxis, rockets, media, entertainment, Nvidia, always Nvidia at the moment. You know, it just shows how much momentum our world has got. So recap everything on the podcast. You know exactly where to find the pod, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and all around the Bloomerverse. From SF in New York, this is Bloomberg.